Good morning, good morning, good morning. I think I'll start off by just saying that I was very saddened to hear of the passing of Penelope Keith. I'd say like my favourite British actress and like comedy performer on television, and it's funny. I obviously already knew that I had a massive crush on her when I was young, but as I was doing a little thing last night, including it into my log where I have to go back and log the previous year's commitment to this defensive action. On behalf of all, I guess, independent performers, and it basically breaks down to all unemployed performers, who all performers are always spending significant amounts of time unemployed. God. Attacking in a way that they've never been able to before, the performers that are not currently employed to sell things have been attacked for their political stance in their self-adapted evolution to the new environment. And what's worse is then they've issued this mandate through political organizations who have then done the same thing. It's become normalized. It's kind of like if imagine there's a busker and you normalize throwing shit at them. That's what the government and the corporations that rely on performers have done. And there basically should be there should be a complete boycott. But I guess the way that the corporates and the political think is that there's always 1,000 monkeys typing 1,000 stories. There's always jugglers and everything in the street. So we can just absolutely use these new censorship tools, these new, ostracism tools and things like that to just selectively steer the entire population's political and corporate usage strategies without anyone noticing. So that was wordy. But yeah, the one thing going through and watching the highlights of her career, I was pleasantly surprised to see how much of her character I've absorbed, and especially not just when I'm because I haven't done like female imitation all that much, like seriously, but it's incorporated into the whole thing, and it's really nice. It's kind of like, and not even kind of, it's like a significant, like mother figure in my life. And I would say at least equal to, but probably more than my own mother, which is that's what the psychiatrists and psychologists were all talking about to do with television. And I guess they haven't realized that all of these YouTube things and TikToks and things are exactly the same as television. And so I guess I'm just so glad that my dad was watching those types of television shows. That in the alternative, it's like, all right, if I remember, say my mum, it's not really that my mum would watch terrible shows, but I don't remember that being there's plenty of TV shows and things that she would watch, but none of them were absorbed by myself more than this. So it's funny. It's like there's a lot of talk about so that's kind of inherently within that in psychological theory would be that I inherently understood my father's opinion of women was more important than my mother's opinion of women, because obviously my mother was quite critical of other women. and women were quite critical of my mother. So I guess you're trying to sort that out. And the way that it's done, or the way that I did it in a quite traditional way, was I observed the attention my father placed upon women. And also I independently observed what my father was watching and selected for myself the female figures that I most resonated with. And that's where Penelope Keith would fit in. Even if she was, it's like, so she was a character. She's playing a character, but it's, it all comes down to, it's like she was playing a character, and then basically there was just this grin is how I would, and I've gone, I'm taking up a lot of time doing this, but she deserves that. It was the way that was handled. It was the acceptable way to play this game, this social game, this social, social game of whatever, with discretion and subtlety. And I kind of think it's like, this is what my mother believes she has been doing, and she never has been doing it. And then further down the track, it's like a dying art form. It doesn't exist now. It's like people are either saying nothing or they're saying just everything, which, I'm included in that. I'm quite straightforward, but not in public. I'm trying to basically uncover what I believe is a gigantic social breakdown. And I'm trying to use all the observations and tools of my life and accumulated, content consumption, and to try and, sketch out perhaps, an even more dystopian future, based on this example. And I think it's like, that's the way I'm doing. I'm saying that her characters, her personas, and her performance styles have been so heavily incorporated. And I just feel this is where we need to start talking about what is the womanosphere, the femisphere, because there are a lot of young women around the place, most prominently the West, who are labeling these terms manosphere and things like that. But I've almost never heard that spoken about, femisphere. And I'd say, I reckon if I could take a grouping of young, let's just concentrate on Australia, young Australian women, and I started saying this, they'd instantly expose that or declare that as misogyny. Let's just write the words down, misogyny. I think that's spelt wrong as well, but never mind, right? So this feminist, they would disguise it as misogyny. And then if I asked them, I said, do you know who Penelope Keith is? And I explained it to them, they'd be like, no, that's for old people. That's an old thing. That was an old lady. If I gathered up a few other figures that made up that thing, I'd say that. So immediately, what I'm able to do is radically shrink the level of women that I'm criticizing, because there has a number on it. And basically, because of my own mother's actions, I'd say that the women I'm talking about were born 1947 to, we can't say 2026 because they're children. So let's go 18 years this way. Let's assume that we're going to be successful in this. So that would be 2008, which makes up a 58, 62 or 60, 58, 61, which makes up a 61 year, cohort under feminist onslaught. And I think that, I believe that more than likely one of Penelope Keith's characters probably made up a significant portion of her screen time, perhaps observing that and interacting with that in the way that she would. Right. So obviously there was a and you can imagine, based on my mother's example, because if we think, I've said 1947. So again, on both sides of this, I've taken off the 18 years to do with children now, so that we can discuss this appropriately and not continue down a snowball kind of strategy of just clumping everyone in the same group. And then we can also counterintuitively, we can add 18 years onto 1947, which brings us up to 57, 65. 1965. Let's do that. So really, adult population, we're talking about 1965 to 2008. That sounds a bit better, doesn't it? That sounds a little bit like we could get that group, And there are types of things, like there were things that happened in 1947, like there was Australia concept, and there was all these things. It was like, so I could almost assume that was the moment that Australia decided to create a feminist cult, or was indoctrinated by it, or was infested with it, or lots of different words, And I'm talking about militarily, okay, because this is I have children held hostage by proponents of feminist ideology, so it's military. So I'm allowed to say that. I'm saying 1965 seems to be the moment where a transitory feminist cult was initially introduced to adult women in Australia, most prominently young women in Australia. And that lines up with the youth movement. It's funny how that's exactly when that started. So now we have, if we have from 1965 to 2008, we have, what is it? 35, 43. 43 years. So let's say 43 years. Of adult indoctrination. Now, because I was discussing Penelope Keith, the way that this original adult young women were responded to culturally was by if you understand the environment they were going into, was, I'd say, by other women, and this is where we have to just get down to, it's like, we are not talking about the dynamics between men and women. We are talking about the dynamics between women and other women. And considering we all have mothers, and our mothers play a huge role, and we all have mother figures, which all play a huge role in our foundational, development. I'd say that this is completely above board to have this conversation. We all look after our mothers, don't we? It seems like we all need to get a little bit better at looking after our mothers over a longer period of time. So we can assume the treatment from women, and let's do a mirroring graph here, right? And it's going to be basically the exact same. So we have, as of 1965, we've had a steady increase for 17 years, slow little trickles of feminism trickling through young women, children, who have now come to age. They're now adults, or near enough. You've got to remember as well, adulthood wasn't until 21. There's also other things like the contraceptive pill, all of these things that were included in this 18 years of indoctrination, right? So if we go here, the way that women were, I'll just use the same graph. The way that women were responded to by other women was very dependent on where you were and who you were, because it is all squeezed through a class system, which is what most of Penelope Keith's characters were exploring through the performance art of comedy. Okay, so you can imagine there is a cohort of traditionally married couples. A very large proportion of society was falling under this thing of pair bonding, long-term pair bonding, surrounded by that, unchanged for a very long time. Then came this cohort coming to age around the 1960s, mid-60s, who, and it's you can, if you go into that as well, you can see that the age thing wasn't a thing. So basically, older women were treating, and older women they had been experimenting with the feminism. So this was the moment that older women first had a significant amount of influence over the legal, societal, and political futures of younger women under the feminist umbrella. And the way that these younger women were looked at was as criminals, because they were sexually perversive, young, experimental women, despite the fact they had been developed into this by older women. The older women decided to target their furies onto younger women. Now, the only way we've ever heard this talked about is through people like Elvis Presley, and the same thing happening by men. So we've had the conversation as a society very over and over and over again. This is probably part of this narcissistic male, self-obsession kind of concept. So it's like, we've told all of those stories about how men were not happy that Elvis was shaking his pelvis on the fucking TV and he was corrupting women and doing these things and introducing black culture and all of this shit. And he went through this turbulent ride of development and fucking all these and all those things. So we've heard all that. But we have not heard from women. We've not heard that this was the cutting edge development period of the telephone, and that women started using the telephone in interesting ways. Very, very, very aggressive political, political influence through telephonic exchange, through gossip and word of mouth, in a ever-increasing telephonic web. Okay, with concentrated and selected outrage towards this, maybe perhaps entertained by the male version, but very, very, very focused and concentrated towards the young women. Why? Because they were threatening their marriages, which had always been happening. But the thing that hadn't been happening was a global and in this case, a national telephone exchange. High levels of interaction. There's the equality movement coming up. So women started poking their noses in and demanding changes in all of these areas. So, of course, this cohort, this 43 years of adult indoctrination of feminist ideology, they ran a gauntlet, an invisible gauntlet in the dark that we've never culturally spoken about, where they ran a gauntlet against the elder women with superpower telephonic fucking abilities to destroy their lives, which brought them into conflict, brought them into criminal society because they were being treated like criminals or lunatics. See this, and I think it's like, they're criminals. No, they're not. Men needed a solution because the men were quite fond of the young, rebellious women. And so solutions like the psychiatric, holding pen that had traditionally been used for vagrants and drunks and mentally disabled people and all of these things, or brain damaged people or people ravaged from war, were hyper-stimulated to protect the young women from the older women in a discrete separation so that there could be the best of both worlds. So basically, modern day psychiatry was created so that men could protect their young mistresses from their wives in some type of fucking shell game. And they basically paid the doctors to provide, and the hospitals to provide this elaborate fucking service to society, rather than just having the conversations and developing things or any of these other things. So these women came under attack and then fell in cushions provided by the men. Right? But the cushions were untested. The cushions were like radical psychotherapy and drugs. And the thought was just like, there's these illegal drugs that they're using in alcohol. So it's like, we've got our doctors to give them other drugs, and that will make them eventually be appropriate for being wives in the future. But all the damage was already done. The wives, the large cohort of wives, came head to head with the large cohort of the youth movement, feminist, indoctrinated young women. And this is how it played out. The wives held on for dear life and maintained which is their responsibility. Their responsibility was to do that. If you looked back in the past, that was the majority of our history, and that this was a radical attack on everyone. And I guess there was more of an insight by older women who could have assumed that that all of these things that the women were experimenting with were incredibly dangerous, but normalized and not brought to the thing. And then this compromise of this psychiatric treatment was then just accepted because I believe that there was so much indoctrination towards that older class of women towards medical, because they were treating the doctors, right? Like the women, like the men were treating the young women. The older women were quite fond of well-spoken, professional doctors. So they assert that, and that was known. So when the men provided, well, what about if a doctor does this? And we understand this is a bubbling up of sexual passion and sexual innuendo and cultural evolution, and so we need to, but they are unwell. And then the women were like, yes, they are unwell. And then so they could use that against it. But kind of, it had to be kind of accepted. It was like, well, yes, she is terribly unwell. Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, she's on medication now, but that should be fine. Yeah, well, we can't have her jumping every fit. Like, that's what it's kind of like. Right? So it was an acceptable compromise that also enlarged the state's capacity to invade people's lives via this agreed upon medical fucking compromise. Then there was a moment in the 1980s where, so that's approximately 60, 70, 80, yeah, that's halfway. 1984 to be exact, where the demographic must have shifted. There were the women now that were 18 were now 40. They were now the old women that initiated the first response. So what did they do? They liberated themselves again. They liberated the fictitious hospital model. Why? Because the hospital model was being used to procure younger women, and now that cohort en masse were now the middle-aged women noticing the trick. They fucking figured it out. They went, hang on a second, there's a bunch of young women coming in here, young, sexually provocative, fucking reckless, rebellious women, and there's a bunch of fucking horny fucking psychiatrists and politicians and business people around treating this like some type of fucking compromise. And I think that some of them started going, oh, my youthful days are over. They maybe start, well, yes, dear, we stuck you all in there because you're all trying to fuck our husbands. How do you like it now? How do you like it now, you old crazy bitch? And then they went, we're not crazy. We are mentally ill, and this stigma against us will not be tolerated. And then this is the slow next level, where we said we weren't crazy. We were the cutting edge, and there was jealousy by the older class, which is wrong as well. It's just wrong. It's all just steady social decline. But there's this tennis match going on between large cohorts of women as they rise in equality and start influencing culture more and more and more and more. So this cohort, which was large because these were the baby boomers, so they'd been stuck in temporary fucking daycare pens, basically play pens. And then once they came to age, once their brain developed through all the drugging and fucking and mistreatment, they realized the trick. And then they have a choice. It's like, what do we do? What do we do with the young horny women that are trying to steal our husbands? They were in the same position. You know, the compromise had eventually bubbled out all their young, youthful exuberance, and they had ended up being married because of the pressure, right? But now their husbands with this, and this is the divorce fucking tsunami. Divorce. Right? So the psychiatric, like the modern day psychiatric theory, most prominently utilized as a compromise towards women's sexual exuberance and pushing social norms, was just a compromise between all-out monogamy enforcement and all-out divorce, tsunami, and the breakdown of that previous thing. And I think we suffer because of all of it. We suffer through all of that. You've got to, when there's the totally enforced monogamous majority, married majority. And this is the thing, we're still like that still exists, but the way that is manifesting now is what's going on with my children. That's why they're being held under the authority of that now fucking 40, 50, 60-year-old monogamous majority that does not exist. And we've had multiple generations on top kind of forced to go through the washing machine of these compromise strategies under all of this fairy dust of bullshit. And this is what happens. And the thing is, it's like none of this is being talked about. We understand that Elvis was only from the waist up. And it's like, oh, look at this, from waist up. I've got pants on today. Elvis was saying, I'm not saying that I'm Elvis, but I'm saying there was a large unseen female war going on for the last half a century. And the most worrying part is that once that cohort, there's another compromise. It's just another compromise on top of it. Fucking hell. And this is what we're currently living in. Compromise upon compromise upon compromise upon compromise upon compromise, because there's still a discussion that is not being had to reveal the underlying forces, that there have always been young women who are going to prey upon monogamous men, and that this greatly disturbs their wives. And as their wives get more power and political power, they have just the same likelihood to mistreat their new powers, and to build not armies, but to build administrative fucking torture centers to process the behaviors that they're criminalizing onto the younger women. Right? So what happened when we've already seen it's like the women were stuck in these psychiatric things and drugs and given diagnoses as a compromise. Then they came of age. They said they'd been basically institutionalized by that period. So and to destroy it then was probably too large. So they made it paid for. They said, well, if I want it to, because, and the reason for that is, as the system was getting used more and more and more because of the social decline, the women's equality, the indoctrination onto the younger women, it was becoming too large. So when this started, it was a really kind of boutique, very high level thing. All the men were very, very good doctors. All the hospitals were quite lovely. All the things were lovely. But then because it was being used too much, too many people were there. Too many undesirables were filtering into this little loophole fucking compromise. And it was too expensive. So private healthcare was introduced, which was a tax on the man. It's like, well, if you're going to compromise me as your wife, you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay for this treatment, which I think is kind of that. It's hilarious because it's like, I think in a lot of cases was probably passive aggressive by the women, and then because they'd actually developed this kind of internal culture, the loophole towards them, because they realized they're like, well, I'm mentally ill, I can do whatever I want. That they're playing up. Everyone's just playing up in it. The doctors are playing up. The doctors start fucking them. It's like a big fucking party being paid for out of just compromise from the 30 to 40 years before. And then this cohort of women basically declared that they were actually the new Wonder Women. And that's where we are now. Where we are now is we have the cohort of women who were raised by the loons. As saying that is the ultimate in freedom. Now, I don't mean to say loon. I'm not trying to be like derogatory towards that cohort. But it's like these are the social pressures that did all of these things. And it's like there's nothing, there's no firm ground on any of it. It's just overwhelming kind of force, overwhelming saturation of our entire culture, because they broke out. Not one flew over the cuckoo's nest, as in Jack Nicholson's movie on the male side, which the male side is absolutely catastrophic. And the reason for that is because it's just one hammer that's supposed to do two elaborately different, like ultimately different fucking things, services to our society with one hammer. And an inbuilt bias that is absolutely insane. So it's already starting to become a basically gender sorting thing. It's like, are you a man? Bang! Are you a woman? Sit on the desk and let me stick my fingers in you. Have some pills. Oh, I like these pills. Here's your license to commit whatever you want. You know, don't come back too soon, you rascally little girl. Oh, get the fuck out of here. Next. Are you a man? Yes. Bang! That's what it became. Just based on like the most simplistic, retarded fucking administrative bureaucracy. That's what it became. And nobody cared. Because traditionally, it was only very, very ill men that were getting in there. Right? So then it's like, then the subculture of the trans thing started, of the gender dysphoria started coming in, because men aren't stupid. So they understood the basis of what was happening. So this created the influx of them pretending to be women, and not just through this psychiatric thing, through the greater society. And this is where we are now. Because we built disgusting socialized filter systems that destroyed marriage, destroyed the concepts of marriage. And there's all these outsourced external professional fucking things that anyone can utilize to attempt to bring their partner into disrepute, to put them back in order. So basically what was attempted onto me was full cycle. What was attempted onto me was the daughter of two fucking dependent, Homes West supported migrants with serious fucking social disorders and substance abuse problems, attempted to, because of the percolation of societal normalization of all of these techniques, and under the tutelage of my deranged feminist super fucking leader mother, attempted to initiate the 50 years back strategy onto me. My husband is playing up and he is just too sexually driven and too crazy. And like this, this has to be fucking attempted. And they attempted everything. But there's no way to pay for it. And none of it was real. None of it was what it was saying it was. It was just simply a compromise upon another compromise upon another compromise, all funded by the big government slush fund through large booms and economic booms and mining booms and property speculation booms and technological fucking encompassment booms and all of these things, and little old fucking psychiatric fucking Roger Cook fucking pill popping fucking, profession, just fucking bobbing up and down like a piece of fucking shit in the fucking tides. Just like, we're getting so rich, oh my God. And then we're here now with the large cohort of women who made that see, in the 80s, if we literally get to that period and we say that medical burden was an evolutionary moment and it should never have been privatized and done it should never have been confirmed at that moment. It should have been like, you caught us, you caught us, bugger. And all the old boys were old. They would have been all the men who threw the cushion under the woman. Well, you were beating those women up with your stupid words and your telephone calls. What else did you expect? And I enjoyed the company of that young woman. She was quite vibrant, But you would have henpecked her to death, so I had to throw a cushion underneath her. And the men that it was being disaffecting, they were undesirables anyway. No, we will not accept a 1980s private health fucking explosion. And that's basically my argument. No, I will not create a medical boom that lasts 40 fucking years and basically becomes like a global fucking pagan, godless, drug-fueled fucking sex party. And that's and then you get back to the women who Penelope Keith's characters highly represented. And you go, that's what she said would happen. That's what they were saying would happen. They had a right to protect the thing. But in the attempts, in the interactions, the passive-aggressive political maneuvers by husbands and wives on the precipice of a divorce tsunami, they built hell. And it's like if you watch any of the interactions going on between my children's mother and myself, look at all that hostility. Look at all the avoidance. Look at all the drug abuse and alcohol abuse, most prominently on her side. Look at all of the no decisions, no compromise, nothing. For like all the strategies she's attempted onto me have not worked because I am defending myself and my mother against all of this shit, but not also my mother, because she would have been in the cohort that made in the 1980s that forced the privatization model in which ex-husband has to pay for the private healthcare and all these things to continue on my thing. And it's like my father paid that to prop up her first husband's introduction to the psychiatric concept. And this is where you get to the next level is in Australia, we are a migratory country. And the way that it's being spoken about is, we're all migrants. And it's like, yeah, it's just that some of us migrated here 180 years ago and some of us just arrived. And the way that this worked in this function, basically, is there's an overlap. There's this complicated thing between genders because there's an eventual point where the women feminists kind of overtook the Playboy men. And we can see that. It's fucking everywhere. But in Australia, you have to include where were you born? Where are you in thing? Because basically, for too long, people have been arriving from the UK to Australia under the opinion that Australians are just backwards hicks and that they are bringing the enlightened United Kingdom culture here. They're bringing their social welfare, their wonderfully thriving, socialized medical system here and insurance system, and they are that, right? Which is, again, the Penelope Keith character, right? But it's men and women, and then there's basically they've decided, no matter what class you are in the UK, that you land in Australia and they're all just lower class hicks, and they act like this. This is how they've created it. So this is why a immigrant son, in the form of my mother's first husband, was able to do this. They're just basically, the true story is they're degenerate fucking drug taking fucking hippies. They got married, and then he took a fancy to other people, as we all do, and threw her in the big fun fucking apple pie fucking psychiatrist Lamborghini party. That's what that looked like, right? And because it was brought here from the UK, it had to. They were from the UK. They're from England. We're just hillbillies who grew up in a tent, and that kind of is true, right? But it's like that's not really true. There's a lot of wars and things like that, and inherently, if you're developing in a large, untamed wilderness, you do start to not, you concern yourself more on, is your spade sharp or is your axe sharp compared to is your top hat shiny? Right? That's the thing. This is the aesthetic failings in translation that have led to this for decades. And this is why I do point the finger at toffee wankers like your prince and say, mate, you're an idiot. William, you're a fucking idiot. It's like you have done more damage to the fucking Commonwealth than you could ever fucking imagine. You don't just hold on to your father's pocket, and walk along the side. That is my top hat, dude. I'm a good boy. I got an Earthshot prize. Look at the Earthshot prize. Doctors, there's homeless people. People are homeless. Do you understand how retarded you look? Do you understand how retarded, how much damage you are doing to the collective British population 300 years back? No, you don't. Why would you? That's that whole silver spoon thing. So basically, United Kingdom citizens have landed here and been utilizing our outskirts version. Our outskirts version. We're on the outskirts. And so our version is shit. Our version is built by fucking hillbillies. And that's where it's so funny. It's like, so they've used their class-based thing, because there are hillbillies. That is correct. But we just weren't all hillbillies. And most of us weren't hillbillies, really didn't require all of these socialized systems, because that's what was developed in the UK by the lower classes to pretend that they were rich, was all of these fantasy things. Is everyone keeping up with me? So basically, a pretend class of English middle-class suburban fucking, thieves stole and distributed the combined efforts of thousands of years of British history and built pretend fucking imitative control compromise systems to protect their marriages and protect their things and all these whatever. Then distributed that around the world, because that's what we did. Britain, we are distributors. That's what we are. And it's like, that's what I'm going to say. So anytime someone calls me a colonizer, I'm going to say, no, we're distributors. Like, that's why you're not naked and alone in the bush. We're distributors. It's the greatest fucking word that I've ever fucking heard. It's like, distributors. When my relatives came here, we were distributors of tea. My personal observations between the differences between tea and coffee are astronomical. Basically, tea, and I wake up, I do these things. The world is, is just the world. It's just there. It's just a thing. If I wake up with coffee, it's like a never-ending fucking war and I'm in the trenches. And it's like, look at what happened directly after global distribution of coffee and its cultural kind of trickling through. And basically, coffee hit cultures where they drank tea. And it stimulated a little bit too much, but it kind of was okay accepted. But where coffee became the heightened function. See, I can have, and this is like we're now in this like Red Bulls. Like, I have a coffee in the morning and then I have a Red Bull at Smoko. It's like fucking hell. You know what I mean? That shifts the whole thing. This is a large psychoactive drug, caffeine, that is being distributed willy-nilly. We have the same with nicotine, and then we have the same with vapes, which were astronomically high levels of nicotine. That just those two things the high intensive caffeine, the high intensive nicotine, you cannot treat basically people that have been poisoned by foreign smoking devices and canned caffeine through the psychiatric community. But their symptoms may mirror psychiatric thing, but then the psychiatric thing is being brought deeply into question here this morning because of the obvious observations of its heightened development period. You know, it's not, you're not treating fucking mass murdering fucking, you know, arsonists and you're treating social decline, you know, undeclared through a class-based lens and filtering out those classes into unacceptable holding pens and lifelong diagnoses to continue the scam going. You know, it's like, where is the control of variables? Where is the actual fucking science going on? You cannot treat basically an entire young population that has been poisoned with high levels of nicotine, caffeine, and and then you get into the other drugs, MDMA, fucking ketamine, all of the fucking other things. Those people are not mentally ill. You know, those people aren't. You don't have a bunch of housewives anymore phoning up and saying that, oh, these young women are trying to steal my husband. And you don't have a bunch of husbands saying, oh, let's put them, you know, let's get doctors to sort it out. You're an industrial scale fucking processing facility, like you're making chicken nuggets. And you're making lifelong consumers of pharmaceuticals and medical intervention and political persuasion and corporate persuasion. And that's the reason. It's like, you can't, there has never been a case where you're exporting and saying, no, it couldn't possibly be a psychiatric condition. Perhaps it's an interaction with a substance. Despite the fact that, like, in general, all of these young people are absolutely swimming in these substances. You know, the normalization of those cultures, it's not a puff of a joint of a very, very low level THC marijuana and some giggly fucking things, which is what started this. It's like full level saturation of untested, you know, high level, pure form, freebasing, like low level stimulants like caffeine, nicotine, and things like ADD medication and Ritalin being used again. So it's like, we've got an entire generation of women that would make Elvis Presley blush in the way that they are acting and behaving. You know what I mean? With the included thing of OnlyFans, social media, you know, with an incredible bias that basically discloses, like, that social media bias exactly reflects what I assume was the telephonic bias that created this psychiatric holding facility and treatment protocol and subsidized, you know, intervention. The largest compromise in marriage that has ever taken place. The largest compromise in marriage since red light districts, basically. That's actually the acceptable place. Most cultures have spoken about that. You know, I think even popes and archbishops have said, you know, oh, this city, you know, would die without the whorehouse, and like that's true. But it was that division, it was that enveloping of those two things. You know, there wasn't an intermediary in the whorehouse, bar the madams and things like that, and perhaps security and pimps. So that's kind of that. So it's like, what are these psychiatrists if they're not pimps? You know, what role does it resemble? And it's like, oh, they're pimps. You know, and then get into the decline. Think about it back to Elvis and imagine that Elvis was interacting with black culture, and that was the time. So we had an explosion of male psychiatrists basically operating as pimps, holding stables of fucking government-funded whores, you know. And then think about what did the African American culture then provide us in the 90s and 2000s. They provided us gangster rap, gangster hip-hop culture, which was all about that. Pimps and hoes and drugs. You know what I mean? Because I guess they started reading the room as well and saying, oh, look, this is just a fucking bullshit fucking compromise track to get a bunch of young promiscuous women and profit from them, you know. Obviously, in segregation and racist concepts in the United States, that wasn't brought to parody. You know, and then I guess to cover the whole thing up, we're drowned as children now in this DEI fucking rhetoric that basically says nothing to look at, everyone's the same, nothing, no, there's nothing wrong, no. You know, to the point where it's like they're going to medicalize and diagnose racism as a mental illness. And it's like, hang on a second. This whole system is built by bullshit fucking class-based elitists. In the global sense, you could say elitists. Compromising fucking bullshit. And then like slush funds through the government. And it's like to basically make the masses pay for weird little hotel visits, private hotel visits, and then when it gets saturated, then to basically, I don't know, just throw them to the wolves. But all of it is bullshit. The underlying foundations that established it are not there anymore. You can't keep floating on the same thing. It's like it's kind of like imagine you're going on an ocean journey, right? And all of a sudden you get to the part where the ocean is frozen. You can't continue. The boat was made to go on water. The boat is not made to go on land or on ice. You've got to walk. And it's like we've built a boat which is called our psychiatric funded, socialized medical pharmaceutical intervention mental health protocol, which is a boat that we're all in. Oh, look at our boat. It's so good. Right? And then all of a sudden it's just you've hit a desert coastline. But we need to continue on. So everybody needs to get out and walk. You know, you can all talk about the wonderful boat ride that you've all been on, that you've forced all the children on, you've done all these things. And I'll continue to say, shut the fuck up and walk. I don't care that your bag's hairy, carry it yourself. I don't care that you used to get paid $200,000 a year to fucking hand out Pez dispensers of fucking speed. Get out and fucking walk. You know, you are underprepared. You are completely indoctrinated into a system that of make believe, and you can't fucking go any further. Unless you can sit there and respond to exactly what I'm talking about. All the interactions specifically to do with telephonic evolution. You know, then the whole world basically starts being plugged in, like the telephone exchange, like, oh my God, there is obviously a pattern of telephones. Watch the movie Wolf of Wall Street. That whole movie is about this through the Wall Street over-exuberant lens. That is a snapshot of a hyper version of what the entire world has been under this octopus of telephonic fucking control that relies on a high-level benchmark of culture that needs to be desirable. That's the New York Sex and the City fucking glowing fucking neon light, right? Where it became that's the central location. The minute you can phone in a telephone from America, you know, with sophisticated sales talk and sell under the one spotlight of New York City that's in another country. And this is like, look at India. India over the last 20 years. It's not like, we need to call that United States India or telephonic India, like we called it British India, when it was under British colonization, because that is what it is. And it's like, this is telephonic colonization. The internet is just the next level. It's like it's the high fidelity version about what's already been happening. I'm already in a holding facility because older men, more than likely, older men didn't like that I might interact with either their daughters or their wives. And so they attempted, based on hereditary discrimination, and also my children's mother had, it could actually be like, in my case, I don't know whether there's any, there probably are, but just in the case of a disgruntled ex-partner, this system has kind of accidentally given her a button of death that she has been pressing for 3 years. Every one of those is me dead. If it was basically done that way, in the most dystopian version. Just like that. Die, 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 die. She's basically, every conversation I have with her is saying, why aren't you dead yet? Why aren't you fucking dead yet? She's basically mocking me behind a glass screen saying, you're never going to fucking do anything. I fucking hate you and you're going to die. Why aren't you dead yet? And that's the full fucking circle. And she's a victim of that. Because why? Because she's not 40 years ago in the higher class of British aristocracy that kind of co-developed this with their husbands as a compromise to kind of out of sight, out of mind, the young flirtatious women that were fucking lifting their skirts up at their husband. No. This is full scale, automated, fucking digitized fucking compromise. And the button doesn't work. No one hooked the button up. So her feelings of outrage are directed towards me, but really they're filtered through discrimination that she's received, because there was one time where she was the young woman who was being attacked and looked at as a hussy, probably by my mother, even by my father, by other men around, because she was a young, attractive, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. By her peers, because she got pregnant and had children, she was having a family, so she's been under constant attack by the jealous fucking masses of telephonic fucking women. And the moment that she hits her pinnacle and she gets her death button stuck in front of her, it doesn't fucking work. It doesn't work like it used to. Old grandma just ain't what she used to be, ain't what she used to be, ain't what she used to be. Old grandma just ain't what she used to be. And now we're back at the same point. We're back at 1980s, political compromise, psychiatric fucking compromise has not worked. The women have figured it out, although she hasn't figured it out yet. I'm trying to every day explain to her what's actually going on. And then I've got my entire life. I was born in a compromised fucking indoctrination cult. And I've been trying to fucking put my fucking breath on the attic window and draw help my whole fucking life. And I'm finally starting to think that it's getting somewhere, And the fact that she's been trying to kill me with a fucking electronic button for the last 3 years is really, really good evidence to what the whole fucking cycle has been. And yes, she's under substance abuse, but my whole compromise is, as soon as she stops drinking and being confirmed that she can kill me with an electronic button, I reckon she's going to be just fine. I don't want to build a compromised fucking medical solution that props up some type of fucking snobby and now imported, now very Indian and African and fucking and Pakistani, whatever, professional class of psychiatrists. I'd rather just say psychiatry was all bullshit. It was all bullshit. It was all a compromise to fucking see out a couple of more decades before the divorce tsunami hit. It's all just social fucking henpecking and maneuvering and it's like this. It's the thing. When the upper class gets the sniffles, you know, the lower class dies of plague, and it's like, this is it. This is it. The sniffles weren't sniffles. They were like, you know, they were interactions with the cultural shifts, and they medicalized it. That's also what we do. You know, as British people, for some reason, and I think it's because it's part of our status system, and it's still being echoed today. It's like we have our health, we have the best doctors. Okay, that's been going on for a long time. So that's why we medicalize things. It's bragging, but it doesn't work when it's infested by lower classes. And unfortunately, that's just what it is. It doesn't mean I'm trying to enforce class-based rule. It means I'm trying to expose class-based rule the same way that things like misogyny and controlling husbands and all of that was liberated by feminists. But then to do it, I have to expose my interactions with multiple classes, which you can't have if you haven't done it, which is the whole point. You know, it is only the higher classes that can demedicalize this compromise strategy of marriage, you know, avoidance, marriage avoidance strategies, conversationally avoidant, you know, kick the can down the road. Oh, just a couple more years married. Oh, I do like to run away with my little mistress. Oh, yes. And I like what the doctors have done to her. They've settled her down a little bit. She was quite emotional. Now she's just plain, you know, she's just plain old dandy. She likes to jump on my fucking Jaguar bonnet a little bit, if you understand. And as long as the missus doesn't see the lipstick stains on my collar, I'm going to get away with this for another fucking 3 years. And that's the thing. It's like, this is what social media did to me. I'm not saying I'm better than those people. I would have done the same thing if I was in that cohort. You know, when I was in a married situation with children and things like that, I was doing it in another way. The reason I blew the fucking thing up was because of social media. 100%. I looked at it and said, you can't have affairs. You can't have affairs because the women are going to find you. The women are going to find you and they're going to blackmail your family. They're going to find you on social media. They're going to fucking become obsessed. They're going to have these weird battles and they're going to fucking do this shit. That's what I made the decision. I think it was 13 fucking years ago because of social media. So I decided at that age to say, I'm just going to be one of those men who just has affairs. Yep, cool. I'll stay happily married. I'll raise my family together and this is all good. Hoorah. Right? No dependence on a medical cult, any of these things. Just like, oh, yep, good old fashioned fucking having affairs. Okay, way more normal than you'd think, considering the entire psychiatric thing was basically created to perpetuate this covert affair strategy. But social media fucked it all up. That's the whole thing. That's what I've been here for 13 years, basically telling the world that social media destroyed the infidelity compromise. Not even compromise, the centuries-old network marketplace of you know, fleeting encounters of infidelity, and replaced it with a global fucking sex fucking trafficking ring, you know, controlled by the psychiatric industry. Yeah, that's why the psychiatric industry in reality is breaking down. Why? Because it's being replaced by social media protocols. So what did they do? They used social media censorship to lock out people doing the thing. And they prop up both. And it's like, I'm guaranteeing you, one of those fucking things is going to fall. You cannot fucking maintain this fucking grid for much longer. it is going to fucking fail. It is a global fucking army of women on phones regulating our society. And in most cases, this cohort of young women who have been promiscuous online, where are they landing after they're burned? All of those things are hyper used and spit out, and now landing with their only defense to defend the core principle of their marriage. But how could you be? How can you be protecting that? It's not the same thing. It's not. It is not the stable foundation that it was, because it relies on ignorance. Not always. Like, there are going to be couples that are married, but mostly it's ignorance. You can't just present a postcard of 50 years ago, and claim ownership over the place because you're married. That's what started this whole mess, was that type of behavior. It was women who were married basically demanding that marriage be the highest protected sanctity on the fucking planet, and that anyone who falls outside of marriage is a degenerate piece of shit. Right? But it's like that relied on infidelity. The reason I'm not married is because infidelity stopped working in the traditional way and was replaced by social media. So it's like social media destroyed the previous covert infidelity, frivolous, fleeting encounters model, and replaced it and commoditized the entire world's thing of it, and in the process, destroyed live music, live events, live performances, like restaurant culture, cafe culture, all of these things, love, romance, like all of everything, just replaced thousands of years of developed sexual human interaction and replaced it with dating apps and fucking OnlyFans. And they did that in fucking 10 years. They also hyper fucking processed these people, use them up, and then throw them to a defunct psychiatric pharmaceutical fucking like policing incarceration system that was developed basically as a compromise to see the previous iteration through the telephonic evolution age, because women were phoning home. The minute a woman could phone your house and say, "I loved our time together. How's wifey? How's wifey going? Huh?" She'd be very upset if she found out about our rendezvous, wouldn't she? "Don't worry, I won't tell her. I'll just sit here by myself." Wifey would be terribly upset if she found out. "Make sure that I'll just phone 3 times, and if she picks up, I'll just hang up, dear." That's what's going on. That's what's been going on. That's what this entire fucking ecosystem is. And it's like, literally at this stage, I'm going to say something a little bit creepy and fucking and old, but it's like, at this stage, basically, I would say it's better to just have a model that's like, hey, every family gets a babysitter, and sometimes the babysitter has sex with the person, and that's completely normalized. That's 1,000 times better than what's currently going on. Big why? Because if just theoretically, hypothetically, if that was the case, I'm never going to say at the end of that babysitting, thing, I'm never going to say, "That bitch be crazy, stick her in the pen and give her some pills." But society will do that to all of these digital performers. I think the moment that you understand that I was in marketing, I was in distribution, I was in all of these things. I was selling dance mirrors, for fuck's sake. So I understand what I'm talking about. there was an indoctrination period mirroring the previous ones I've already spoken about for 10 years, or no, I'll say 5 years, extreme indoctrination of young girls to dance on the internet. Harmless dancing. I was even fooled by it. I was interacting with them. So I was like, oh, this is harmless. And the schools and things are, dancing is a high art form. It's a high thing. But broadcasting, dancing on phones and on computers for 5 years and creating a marketplace of dancing online for popularity for young girls, it's like that you've got to pick a pocket or two. That's what was done by these apps. Into a ready and waiting OnlyFans paradigm. So it's like, and think about and basically under the shadow of a global war. So it's a global war. The young girls were stuck to distract them from the war. Were stuck in a babysitter. Were given a babysitter fucking iPhone where women were being socially, judged and rated based on their dancing online as girls and encouraged to do that. And then they land in a ready and waiting sexual marketplace. So that system is inherently sexual indoctrination and sex slavery. An attempt. So it's like it's an attempt at global covert sex slavery. And at the same time, the adults were distracted by, an incredibly large things of novel fucking digital experiences. And this new concept of voyeurism where you could look into people's lives. And all I've been doing is traditionally what all of the mainstream news and media was doing. Because I lived and developed through the older paradigm in real life. I didn't have any long-lasting affairs, really, because that's not what I'd had one with an older woman who was a teacher, and that was a nightmare, and I didn't even have sex with her. So in my experience, that was the problem. I would go out, have intense things, have intensely dramatic, whatever, and that would go. And also, I was participating in live experience, live music, culture, like all of these things. That's what I was doing. And it was a double life because there was no way I would have wanted to do that with the person I had children with, because it just wasn't that it just, and that's what has been happening for thousands of years. But it was destroyed by social media. And it's like, look what they did with it. And the way that these are being discussed, it's like we're trying to protect things. Nothing can be protected. Anything that is developed through this telephonic fucking evolution adaptation period is on the chopping block, has the potential of being on the chopping block quite dramatically. The minute I walk hand in hand social media down with the psychiatric fucking industry and say, congratulations, I wed you in harmony, natural matrimony, whatever the fuck it is, forever and ever and ever, and then kick them off a cliff, right? Things start becoming a lot easier because they are symbiotic fucking co-developers in this. Why? Well, it's really simple when you understand that the vast majority of psychology graduates or psychiatry graduates, sociology graduates go into marketing. And the tech space has been the largest employer of these marketing graduates, quite like India has become, the pseudo telephone exchange for the marketing and distribution and customer service and all of these things. It's like, this is what happens. We created an entire generation of psychopaths, because if you can discover what a psychopath is, if that is your job, is to dictate what a psychopath is or a sociopath is, then when you go and get paid by a tech company, they're basically paying you to be a sociopath. And because you've studied it, right? So if you can diagnose someone's dissociative, antisocial behavior, you can invoke that dissociated antisocial behavior and direct it towards the social media company or the tech company's fucking bank balance. And then you're remunerated directly in an incentive program to how well your sociopathic fucking development is. The story 10 years ago there's a really good documentary called Fishhead, which basically said, there's a high distribution of psychopaths and sociopaths as CEOs of tech companies. If you watch The Wolf of Wall Street, he basically writes a script to turn his sales force into sociopathic fucking manipulative salesmen. Right? The universities were producing Machiavellian fucking sociopaths on demand, whores, the red light district for sociopathic manipulation. And then they super powered them. They supersized them, as Americans often do, through a global telephonic, audio-visual, hyper-stimulating fucking network of media called social media. And then they basically then filtered only the highest level manipulative sociopathic fucking control centers through the world, which meant that they basically started putting a sledgehammer through thousands of years of human developed culture. And in the most dystopian version, they basically mandated total and utter subservience to digital indoctrination, or you die, or your children are taken and you die. You die in a dungeon, scraping at the fucking walls, ringing the bell until you fucking run out of fucking air because you've been buried alive by those people. This is where I live. I'm the only known survivor of being buried alive. Does that make me a vampire? You know? Or does it make me one of the only people around me that successfully stopped playing a video game that was illegally distributed and called Planet Earth, that was illegally distributed and called the world? You know, if you met your husband or wife on a video game, it's like, gross. That's disgusting. You know what I mean? Yes, they met on a video game. Isn't it gross? I believe it's so gross. You know, I might just phone my senator and say, I don't like this. You know, I think that is the heart of mental illness, really. And if it wasn't for those psychiatrists being grotty little organized criminal, basically pimps, I would have a word with them. What could we do? Maybe we could just laugh at them all instead. Would that be good? What if we just laughed at them all and said, oh, look how silly they are. Oh, look, they're all playing a little sex video game while everybody watches and all the money disappears. Filthy. I know. I didn't like it. I didn't like video games at all. Yes, well. Oh, well. Things do happen. It does appear that one big chunk is going to be taken out all at once, so that's good, isn't it? Yes. Well, I did have a few experiences, but never online. You see, it was always in person. I would have these. Sometimes it would just be a fleeting touch on the hand or something. That would keep me occupied for a year or two. Yes, too much right in your face, isn't it? It's all out on the table. That's what I don't like either. You know, it's all in the suspense, really. Yeah. Well, I can't see it lasting much longer, can you? No, especially once we get... If we get all the ladies at the knitting club and at the cake stall to just quietly have a word with that man, and we all understand that he's up against the rope because of what we found out about his extracurricular activities. Do you understand what I mean? Of course. Well, I think we can, let's conservatively project, considering it's 1:06, perhaps it's only a minute away, really. A minute away, and we should all be back on board, and done a lot of work this morning, haven't we? Just having a look. What have we got? Yeah, I know. I think it was straight out. When I did say they were killed by WA, she was killed by WA. I know it was straight out. Try and blame it on something else. Still 106. Still the offer. Yeah, well, I offered her $30,000. I don't know what the young lady wants. I wonder how long that would last with her drinking habits, if you understand what I mean. Okay. Well, it's still there. Yeah, I've got it on the screen. And it's still 106. Yeah, well, obviously one day she'll get the memo and understand that I can't make arrangements to move money out of accounts until she's ready to receive it. It's just, and she's kept me terribly tied up with all of this, but we have got a lot of successful work done. Yes, it is a shame. Oh, it's 1:07. 10:07. It's 10:07. It means it's 10:07. Yes, that's correct. Oh, yes. Well, everyone expects him to be a man. Yeah, no, it was genius on my behalf, I believe. Anyway. Yeah, just going over the old paperwork. Oh, there it is. Yes, well, the designs are different. Well, I know so far 2 stories, about 4 to 8 rooms. That's the Mount Wise Hotel. Pre-book now if you'd like. If you'd like to pre-book. What was I looking for? The Femosphere, yeah. That's right. Yeah, well, I think it's pretty much over. Well, basically my thinking is there's no way to rekindle a in-person either, marriage or perhaps a saucy affair by staying at the Mount Wise Hotel, completely discreet booking and services. Yeah, well, there could be like a little social club, I suppose. We could get everyone together who's stayed there, all of our customers, and say that, yes, that could fruit results, I suppose. I think there is going to be. The people are going to want to, to really find solid ground, terra firma, after all of this video game. Yeah, I believe so. So I think it's a good investment. Any news on for the hotel? Oh, okay. Oh, well, that'll be exciting. Anyway, I've got to go. I'm still on line. It's 1:08 now. 10:08. So, all right. Thank you. Yeah, I think we've done a lot here this morning. And yes, I was terribly saddened to hear of her passing, but I will enjoy for the rest of my life the highlights of her life. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. It's amazing what you can get done on the phone, And I think it's amazing what you can get done with letters, writing letters. And I would like to start doing that a bit more as well, I think, because it's, it's quite a high art form. And it's amazing what nasty things happen when a bunch of people avoid things. And I think that's what I'm really trying to expose, that, there's a certain level. There's no doubt I have a pile of paperwork somewhere gathering while I'm at war, which is quite normal. People can't obviously open envelopes while they're at war. And I roughly know the amount. If those amounts have gotten larger, that seems strange, because that's basically extortion, and that's what kidnapping generally is. You kidnap children and then you extort someone for their money. So considering that I did declare war on this and that this is my wartime defense against this, like, this is all, I would suggest that those numbers become zero, the numbers that the West Australian government is sending out. And I perhaps suggest that those numbers start creeping up towards the positive, and I start suggesting that the West Australian government starts offering me a settlement for their ill treatment of my entire family over a very, very long period of time. And if that means that they go into administration, then I would then like to know that figure so I could basically appropriately decide how much of that I would like to redisperse through a government mechanism, so I could basically donate that. But I need it to come through, and that would be my intention. I don't know what that makes me. I don't know what that means, but that would be my intention. Basically, I have my own business in the works, always have. And so if there was a large settlement, I would instantly basically put that through. But it needs to be a very large settlement. You've stolen my children and used them as collateral to attempt to extort me to prop up an experimental fucking digital sex trafficking ring and defunct illegitimate psychiatric profession and pharmaceutical distribution. And I'm sitting here drinking tea. But yeah, I would like to get this moving. I can't see any possibility that that all of this isn't going to completely fall down in a gigantic pile of fucking burning, steaming shit. But yeah, come what may. Thank you.